Thank you, Adrian. Yes, I won't be speaking in Spanish. I'll be speaking in English, and please forgive me for not being able to turn on my video. There's some technical problem, and I just could not fix it because I'm out of Manila, my office, and I'm in Singapore now. So I just could not get the technical support. So my apology for that. But at least you could hear me. So let me just start my views on this. It was really interesting, and thank you, Jamie, for considering me coming from Asia and Pacific. And I was really interested to see how it is like in Latin American country, because we often are very much focused on our own region, Asia and Pacific. And I really enjoyed going through those presentations. Very, very interesting. And to see that there are a lot of similarities as well as differences between the two regions. The similarities I found, some of the similarities are that the subnational governments, the public spending and public investment have been increasing. It is the same in this region as well. There are diversity among subnational governments, very similar, a high dependence on intergovernmental fiscal transfers. I noted that Asia has 50%, Latin America has 56%. So we remain on the high side. That's a similarity. And I do see that there's a very important reforms required in the intergovernmental fiscal transfer system, given that the dependence of the subnational governments on these transfer systems. So it's a similar case in Asia and Pacific, I would say. The sources of revenue is also very interestingly similar, though I would say that in Asia and Pacific, the intermediary government, we often call provincial and state governments, they have a lot of other areas of revenues, like in India has a very high areas of revenue potentials, whereas some countries like Nepal, they have very limited. And Nepal being a new federal country, also the provincial government's authority, the tax authority is quite limited, and also the capacity. So yes, I see a lot of similarities. And I also noted that you emphasized on the importance of intergovernmental coordination, which is definitely very, very important. Digitalization and incorporation of climate change. So these are some of the very interesting similarities I noted, which is in Asia and Pacific. There's some very interesting differences. I mean, I know that the debt was an issue, but not so much now, which is not so much of a case of a problem in Asia and Pacific. And many countries, many subnational governments in Asia and Pacific are still not allowed to, or have very restricted debt mobilization authority. But there are places like countries like India, where they are allowed to collect a debt, but there is a limit and all that. So the another interesting thing I noted is the equalization fiscal transfer system. I was surprised to see that it's still not in practice in many places, and also surprised to see that discretionary transfer is still being used. So for me, it's been a very useful 1 hour of learning, and to see that how it is similar and different. So what came to my mind is I have few questions and or observations, let's say, for the team. I was curious to know as to what are the reasons for the diverse performance. There are clearly very diverse performance among subnational governments. I mean, that's not only across the countries, but within the country also, there are clearly a lot of the performance is so diverse. It would be interesting to see as what are the key reasons, because talking about Asia and Pacific, this institutional capacity always comes at the forefront. Like, it's so much depending on their institutional capacity. So I just was interested to know whether it is so much to do with institutional capacity, it is to do with the political economy, because that also play a very important role on their performance, and also digitalization. These are the, I mean, digitalization can be looked at it from the institutional capacity framework as well. But I just was curious to know as to what would be the very critical or major reasons for those And when this thing of discretionary transfer came, I was quickly thinking about this accountability framework. What kind of accountability framework are there in place when we still talk about this discretionary transfer, which is definitely concerning in a way, and analysis of increasing authority. Now that we have been, I mean, it's the same situation in Asia and Pacific, that more and more subnational governments are being given authority and responsibilities for public service delivery and also revenue. And whether or not this increase in authority have actually reflected or have improved the public service delivery, or it hasn't, would be very interesting to see, as something we are also planning to look at. And then now the data, I mean, obviously compared to the past, the data is improving, the data gaps are lessening, or but then I'm just curious to find out as to how central government as well as this local governments or subnational governments are utilizing this data, and how are they utilizing it for now that these data are available. Now, and then you talked about strengthening coordination. It would be a very useful learning for us as to how to do that, because we often struggle, because that's, yes, identified as a very important element, but how to do it is always an issue. So I would be very interested in these areas, and also, like as I mentioned, these three dynamics: the institutional capacity, political economy, and digitalization. And my colleague from OECD has already talked about the subnational government, the World Observatory, and subnational government and finance. And ADB has also contributed, has been a partner, let's say, to this edition of the World Observatory, and we look forward to the report, because that would give us some country profiles of how our countries in Asia Pacific are doing in subnational government finance, and we really look forward to the data to actually decipher some of the policy reform areas or institutional reform areas that we as the International Development Bank to support our development member countries. So I know I've not used the 10 minutes, but I think I could stop here now. Adrian, over to you. Thanks.